are Bill Huey, Glenn Gardner, Julia Martin, and Fillmore Wilson. City staff present today are Kim Lavin, BARS Administrator, and Frankie Pinto, Senior Preservation Planner. The order of the meeting today will be as follows. We'll start with an introduction and overview from city staff for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by an applicant presentation, and there is a 10-minute time limit on this presentation. Any and all presenters should please state their name clearly for the record, and persons affiliated with the project, owners, developers, designers, and consultants should all speak during this period as opposed to during public comment. By ordinance, the board can ask questions of the applicant at any time, but by custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by public comment. If you are speaking as a member of the public, please state your name clearly for the record. This will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. After that, we will have a period of applicant response. The applicant will have 5 minutes to clarify or respond to anything raised during public comment or by the city staff comments and recommendations. Please keep in mind this is not an opportunity to reopen your presentation, only to clarify or respond. This will be followed by board discussion and a vote. At this time, the applicant presentation and public comment period will be closed. If there is any inaccurate information, as an applicant, you may raise your hand and I may recognize you, or if there is a specific question that a board member has for the applicant, you may speak when recognized. Please be aware that our operating procedure will change upon returning to in-person meetings, the date of which has not yet been determined. Once we do return to in-person meetings, we will discontinue the use of Zoom, but continue to live stream on the City of Charleston YouTube channel. The public may speak in person at the meeting or provide written comments in advance. If any member of the public would like to submit written comments to be read in the meeting, those must be submitted at noon on the day prior to the meeting. Written comments will be provided to the board members in advance and acknowledged by myself, the chair, during the agenda item to which those comments apply. Item numbers 2, 111 South Battery, 8, 1 Marion, and 10, 162 Wentworth have been withdrawn by the applicants. And I would remind everyone, please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, and livability concerns are not within the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. Now I'll turn it over to Kim for some virtual meeting protocol.
Thanks, Lindsay. Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board or staff, will be given the capability to speak when they're called on during the public comment period. The chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. Public comment. The applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you'll need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. For the board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim for accuracy. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they'll call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. Results and staff comments will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcasted to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel.
Thank you, Kim. Agenda item number 1, 33 Moultrie Street.
Give me just one more minute. All right. 33 Moultrie Street is requesting after the fact approval for the demolition of historic features of the building, included canted storefront and accessory structure. The building isn't rated in the North Central neighborhood and was built in 1914. It's in the historic materials demolition purview. So this is where the building's located on the south side of Moultrie Street at North Tracy. And here's the previously existing site. This is the east side. And this is looking south. This is another photo of the east side at the rear. You can see both structures here. This is looking east on Moultrie Street and looking west. Sanborn maps from 1944 and 1955 depict the same building. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. And Jessica, you have the floor when you're ready to speak.
You don't hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm Jessica Crittenden. I'm representing Colonnade Building Company in the restoration renovation of 33 Moultrie Street. I have Kyle Thaxton is the owner. I have him available for questions that I may not be able to answer, something specific that I'm not familiar with, but I'll do the best I can to go through the list of items we are asking for approval for: repair and replace in kind the 1/2-inch beveled siding clapboard. We are hoping to replace as little as possible for obviously financial reasons, but when necessary, we will replace with in kind beveled siding. Otherwise, we can repair and keep what's the existing wood siding. We are asking for approval for the repair and replace of the roof line that is on the storefront, which is on the North Tracy Street side, that flat roof to be the original roof, which was the good picture. Underneath was rolled asphalt. That's what we are going to replace. And we built that parapet wall to straighten up that line, that angle, and support that roof, the new roof going on there to match the up at the gable where it was not, where it was met was not secured and not a stable roof to begin with when we purchased. So we are hoping that is approved and good to go, that angle. Then the exterior, any of the questions that were concerns, the windows and doors. The windows, which I sent Tracy, Kim and Tori, are inside the structure, inside the building. This is the piece that was on that corner that I think one of the board members had asked about this morning. We still have that. That's inside. That can be, obviously needs to be repaired and cleaned up. And then that's a set of the windows that were repairing or replacing the same windows, existing windows. I think the stairs were the only other question. The mason right there on that corner had, I guess, a little miscommunication, had put those CMUs, obviously double stacked them. They need to, that's obviously not a correct stair or step. So that top layer will come down when the structure is secure and supported on that corner. And the stairs will look the same as they did, obviously nicer and cleaner, and more secure on that corner. And it'll look the same with the exterior door right there on that storefront will be there. It's in the doors inside the house. It just needed, the framing around that door needed to be a lot of repair done to it to secure it, obviously. Building had been a little bit neglected over the years. So hoping that those things can be approved, those things can keep going forward. And I think that's all the things that were in question. So I think, if anything else, questions or whatnot, I'm free to answer those.
Thank you, Ms. Crittenden.
Uh-huh.
Do board members have any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll move on to public comment.
So we have Kevin Eberly speaking.
Hey, everybody. So just one or two quick things. First, there was a fellow, I didn't catch his name, who was there this morning who had suggested that the building might date to 1919. And I just wanted to confirm that's actually incorrect. It was built in 1914. There's a record of the building permit having been pulled that fall, and the street was renumbered in 1919, which I think maybe accounts for the confusion about the date. But in any event,
Okay.
I'm very concerned about the loss of an unusual corner store for the uptown. Corner stores are a lot more common in Charleston Village and the Lower Peninsula, where they kind of grew organically over time. But this neighborhood was built out at, the 19-teens, 1920s as a residential area. And so it's odd to even have a corner store. And so I think it's interesting, if nothing else. And I would just say, I hate to be a cynic about the whole thing, and I hope that I'm wrong, but just have a concern that maybe preservation was not always the real mission here, given, as Jessica was saying, that the knee wall being closed out, some postings on social media about swearing the room up, the fact that no approval had been sought in advance, that sort of stuff gives me a little concern. But whether, it started that way or they've come around to the idea of preservation, as long as the door, the trim, and all of the windows are confirmed to be on site and actually reused, I can't really find any fault with the leveling up of the roof. But I would just be very concerned that the board would give approval. And then I know Jessica, maybe it was a slip of the tongue, but she said, well, repair or replace the windows. And I would not want to see the windows replaced on board's approval with the idea that they were actually going to be returned and have that turned into replaced. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Kevin. Kim, I only see comments from Historic Charleston.
We have April Wood. She would prefer to speak.
Okay.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for after-the-fact approval for the demolition of historic features at 33 Moultrie, and we thank the applicant for their time this morning for the site visit. We are opposed to the after-the-fact nature of this request. It is under our understanding from the site visit that the corner store entry will be reconstructed using salvaged materials, and we believe this is appropriate. We also understand from the site visit that the historic windows were salvaged and are inside the house. These windows should be repaired and reinstalled rather than replaced. Regarding the change in the roof line, we believe that it's important to keep the historic angle of that roof line rather than modifying it for today's aesthetics. Thank you.
Thank you, April.
And that's all for spoken public comment.
All right.
Sorry, this is Anna Catherine Carroll. I had signed up as well.
Please.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We had the opportunity to visit the site this morning as well, and we were disappointed to see the extent of the removal of historic material. This is a very unique corner building in the North Central neighborhood, and all character defining features, namely the canted storefront configuration and detailed trim work and roof line, should be restored to their previous specifications. Further, any historic material removed and stored on site, including the windows, should be restored and reused rather than replaced. So we would ask that the board deny this request for after the fact approval.
Thank you, Anna Catherine. Can I assume that's it?
That's it.
All right, well, I'll turn it over to you for city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you. So just to recap the chain of events, BAR staff had conversations with the owner in March of this year, and the process was fully explained at that time, including the use of Sanborn maps to frame this historic significance of the house. The owner knew the process and chose to ignore it. There are no permits for exterior work, and only interior work is permitted, the scope of which has been exceeded. The permit currently reads no floor plan changes, interior renovations, interior hardwood flooring, drywall, and selective demo for discovery. At the time of the stop work order, all interior walls had been demolished, the storefront demolished, aluminum siding removed, porch flooring removed, parapet wall on the roof installed, along with the blocked-in foundation and framing at the storefront corner. The applicant has stated that all materials will go back to where they previously existed, but there are no details of the proposal, no photos of pre-existing conditions besides the ones I found online, and no drawings to speak of. The blocked-in foundation and framed wall, along with social media posts about squaring off walls, make it pretty clear that this was no accident and the owner had no intention of retaining the historic details, materials, or configuration. The storefront is an important part of the history of North Central neighborhood, and its configuration and historic nature should be protected. So our staff comments are the following. The storefront is significant and should be retained. The detailing, trim, door, side lights, quatrefoil, barge board, ball and stick, beaded spindles should be drawn for clarification in existing and previously existing or proposed conditions. The block foundation should be removed to return to previously existing configuration. The historic accessory building visible on the 1951 Sanborn map was demolished after the stop work order was issued and should be reconstructed. The broken tile finish on the steps was not original, but was very common in the 1950s in the neighborhood and should be reconstructed. The roof might benefit from the parapet construction, but of course, properly drawn and detailed. Any and all remaining windows in the building should be reinstalled or rebuilt as previously existing, true divided light, single pane wood windows. A complete set of drawings, including preservation plan depicting materials to be rebuilt and materials to be salvaged, should be submitted to BAR staff for approval prior to any exterior work. And a permit application with the revised scope of work shall be submitted to the building department for a complete scope of work prior to stop work order being lifted. I think it cut off the bottom. But the staff recommendation is denial with staff comments noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Ms. Crittenden, do you have any response or clarification to anything raised in public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Yeah, so the windows, when I said repair or replace, there are some that are broken, so they would have to be replaced. But we will repair or they would have to be replaced, but the ones that are still intact would be, just secured and put back the same. And the CMUs on that corner will be the same stairs that they were originally. And the storefront door, that same facade that was, in the pictures from Google, it would be the same upon completion.
Thank you, Ms. Crittenden.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll now open it up for board discussion and a vote.
I have a quick question for staff. Is there any photographic indication of the accessory building? I didn't know about it or notice anything.
No, other than the fact, Google.
Julia, I found it on Google. It's behind, I think it's the view from Tracy Street.
Okay.
You can see the shed in the back.
This one.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll start. I think I'm pretty much fully aligned with staff and the other public speakers. I know Fillmore was talking to the contractor, I guess, about the adjustments to the roof line and the addition of the parapet. I'm having a hard time understanding why it would really change the drainage pattern or anything. So can I just ask Fillmore if he has any kind of insight on that element?
Julia, I really don't. Certainly the parapet might allow a simpler water control if they were concerned about that, because I believe, it's hard to tell from photographs, but I believe that that nearly flat roof slopes to the Tracy Street side, and the parapet would allow, if they reslope the roof the opposite towards the back, it would make a shorter gutter, but you could certainly leave the roof in its original configuration with the pitch towards the Tracy Street side. And if you were worried about the rainwater washing the wall, you could gutter it and remove the water. So I'm not quite sure what the decision-making process was, but the only sort of logical thing that I can come to is that they were going to change the pitch of the roof to the rear, and so it was an effort to control the water and guide it off to the rear of the building.
Based on the outline of the siding and everything that's existing on both the east and the west, it appears to me that it already did go toward the back of the building, but I don't know.
It's looking at the photograph that's up right now. It's possible. I can't tell from that photograph. I hadn't really thought about a logical explanation for it, so I probably have to go back to the building and take a closer look to come up with it. But I think it does. Well, if you're right, from that picture, it looks as though it pitches to the rear. So already, and so the only thing I can think of is just to try to either to. The whole idea was to put the parapet up there and increase ceiling height. I don't know if that's possible too. I'm not sure. But if the ceiling height staying the same and the roof staying at the same pitch, and the parapet, it just make sure the water all went to the rear.
So yeah, that's the only item on the list of staff comments that I'm struggling with a little bit. I mean, maybe I could understand a shorter parapet that followed that original historic slope and would presumably achieve the same goal of keeping water from coming down the side of the building. But I'm just gonna see what other people have to say.
It's Glenn Gardner. I was trying to look on Google Earth instead of just Google Maps and try to understand how that roof was functioning previously. And Fillmore, I certainly defer to, in any of your insight over what I'm trying to look on an aerial or on a satellite image. But I will go ahead and comment, aside from the roof, while the back shed building, I guess, was demolished with no permission, the only positive of that, I guess, if you want to find a positive, is that it does appear to de-intensify what likely wouldn't be allowed currently by zoning, with the shed up against that back property line affecting the back neighbor. But I don't see a lot of architectural merit to it, but at the same time, we don't have the shed in front of us to look at to really determine if it did have any architectural merit.
Yeah, this is Bill. I would say I'm in agreement with staff's comments and recommendations. I'm just really stricken by how unique this building was and hopefully will be again. This corner commercial access is truly unique and really almost a one-of-a-kind element. It's a shame that it had been taken down, and I think it should be restored as closely as it was before, along with the other parts.
Yeah, Fillmore here. I'm in, Glenn, I went on Google Earth too and tried to get a feel for it. I was trying to see the configuration of the roof and what the closure system was on it. And the gable roof had asphalt shingles on it, I think, at least at the time of the Google Earth photographs, but I couldn't get a good view of the rest of the roof. So I'm in line with staff comments and with Bill, and I'm a little up in the air about the parapet, but I think that in general, what's been done to the building without permission should be denied, and that I am in line with staff's comments for correcting it as much as possible. Glenn, I'm with you. I think that the issue with the shed could probably be worked out perhaps with staff and zoning, and what happens with the zone if a zoning issue with that shed now that it's gone.
This is Lindsay. I'm in alignment with staff as well, and had a similar concern with the shed, whether it can actually be built back or not. But again, I agree with you, Fillmore. I think that could be handled at the staff level.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say, now that the shed is gone, technically, I don't know, Kim, what would it appears to me that it wouldn't be allowed by zoning currently to build. So now that it's gone, I don't know that you could build. How would that technically work?
I think it's grandfathered for a little while.
Yeah, the pad is still there. So especially considering that, I think there might be some grandfathering.
Gotcha.
As a non-conforming.
I have a question for my fellow board members about staff comment number 4 about the broken tile finish on the steps. Just taking a poll. You guys agree with staff on that one?
I do. It is historic, 1950s, and I think if we're talking about historic elements, I agree with staff's comments on the tile.
Yeah, I do as well. It is just a documentation of part of the evolution of the building, and it's very, period specific too. So it's really kind of interesting to be able to see it, as 50s vintage evolution part of the building.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that comment either.
I'll make a motion for denial with staff comments noted. Period.
Oh. Julia, were you going to say something else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for denial with staff comments noted. Do I have a second?
Fillmore, I'll second.
Thank you, Fillmore. Now I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Glenn?
In favor.
Julia?
Yay, in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay, in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Crittenden. Agenda item number 2 has been withdrawn by the applicant, and we are on agenda item number 3, 0 Gibbs Street. Kim, if you'll give us an introduction.
Thanks. 0 Gibbs Street is requesting final approval for the complete demolition of a 1970s garage and a 1980s addition. The building's a category 4 in the Charlestown neighborhood, was built in 1970s and 80s and in the old and historic district. Here's a aerial for your location. Here is the garage in question and the rest of the house. It's almost to Legree Street. And very, not very visible behind the trees, but there it is right there. And looking west on Gibbs Street, looking east, you can see it right there behind this wrought iron fence. Sanborn maps from 1888 and 1944. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Kim, it doesn't appear that the applicant is logged in unless they are under a different name.
Oh, I got it right here. Mr. Dufford?
You're,
Okay, am I here?
There
yes,
you go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Phil Dufford, and my studio, Dufford Young Architects, is working with Mr. Derek Riggs on the restoration of the house and grounds at 0 Gibbs Street. If you all would go to page 2, the survey that kind of shows you the site. The property is comprised of a single-family residence at the rear with a garage studio building forward of this. The residence is a former dependency. If you go to page 3, that gives you an idea of what that looks like. It's a former dependency to a large late 19th century Victorian that once stood at the corner of Legree and Gibbs Streets. I'm going to read you briefly from John Poston's book, The Buildings of Charleston. Per this text, it was constructed around 1890. The house, the actual residence was, and rehabilitated with additions, which the things we're talking about tonight, beginning in 1968. The roof and cupola retain the original form of this large stable and carriage house that formerly served a large Victorian dwelling to the east that faced Legree Street. It was pulled down in the 1960s. In 1968, this dependency was saved and adapted as a new residence with a contemporary addition and garden. So if you go to slide number 4, it gives you an idea of the buildings as they progress back. In 1970, the garage was built, and that you see that in the foreground. And then in 1985, an addition was added to the south facade of the residence, which you can see with the copper roof at the center of the property. As we begin our design process, we are requesting your approval to remove both the garage building and the 1985 addition. The city buildings permits records, Sanborn maps, newspaper clippings, along with some selected demolition, corroborate the timeline for the structures in question. We don't believe either contributes to the character or historic integrity of the property, and therefore ask for your permission for their removal.
thank you, Mr. Dufford. Are there any board questions for the applicant at this time? All right. Kim, do we have any public comment?
We don't have any public comment.
All right. If you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Requests for demolitions are appropriate and are not of historic construction, so we're recommending final approval.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Dufford, did you want to respond to anything?
No, thank you.
All right. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote.
I'm just make a motion for final approval. I agree with staff.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval. Do I have a second?
Second,
Is that Bill or
Glenn.
sorry? All right, I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Julia.
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Dufford.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 4, 107 East Bay Street. And Glenn, I believe you're recusing for this one.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Kim, kick Glenn out.
Will do.
All right. If you will give us an introduction overview of the project, please.
107 East Bay Street's requesting conceptual approval for the replacement of cement tile roof with standing seam copper. The building is a Category 2 in the Charleston neighborhood and was built in 1792 in the Old Historic District. Here's the aerial showing the building on the west side of East Bay, just south of Elliott Street. And some existing site photos. Here it is right here. Oh. Well, you can kind of see the roof line right there if you turn your head a little bit. This is looking south on East Bay Street and looking north. Sanborn maps from 1888 and 1944. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. Mr. Otis, you have the floor.
Mr. Otis, you're on mute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Sean Otis with Spire Contracting and Roofing here in Charleston. I am seeking approval for removal of this cementuous shake roof and replacement with double lock metal standing seam. And we would be running the metal standing seam up the sides of the dormers, obviously across the entire roof. And I'm proposing to cap the parapet walls with copper. It would be crimped and soldered as well. This roof is hardly visible from any of the streets. You can catch a glimpse from it or of it at certain angles. The roof is completely failing, and I don't know if slate was on it at one point, but the structure cannot. I consulted with my engineer, Mike Hantz, and the structure in the condition it's in would not be able to handle the existing load going back with slate. So the house is renovated, it's finished. We have significant water entry, and putting slate back on it with the existing conditions is not really an option. That's why I'm proposing copper standing seam, double crimped. Let's see, and then capping the parapet walls, running up the dormers. And then I did, looking back and getting into this project, I noticed that there was a stop work order on this property at one point due to a deck, a rooftop deck that was installed, not being permitted. We would be removing and disposing of that deck to go back to the original layout of the roof. I think that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Otis.
Oh, one more thing, sorry. Copper is really our only material that we could use on this due to the neighboring building is obviously connected. It's also copper, so any other kinds of metal, I don't know if the zinc supplements to the slate would affect the copper, but any steel products going on this roof would cause galvanic corrosion in the valley, so they just would not be acceptable. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Otis. Kim, do we have a picture of the rooftop deck?
I don't think we do. Might be able to dig one up, but I don't have one from the roof itself, I might have one from the ground looking up.
I don't think it's relevant to my decision, but if my fellow board members want to see a picture of that rooftop deck that's being removed. The
It
description.
should be, sorry, it should be on one of my drone photos in the presentation. You should be able to see it. It is a very subpar structure that should not be up there.
And while we're looking, do any board members have any questions for the applicant?
I had a quick one, Mr. Otis. Do you have a detail or to clarify how the cap flashing will terminate on the front and the back of the building?
I do not have a detail on that. It would just be a standard coping running about 3.5 inches down and then crimped at any turns and soldered where necessary. I do not have a detail on that right now. The masonry is failing. And so this is really my solution to get this building watertight and not create a safety hazard in this area. The masonry is in good enough condition that if we were to cap it now, I don't think it would fall apart. However, doing significant masonry work on East Bay Street right here would create a major safety issue. It is doable, but to answer your question, I do not have a detail on that at this time.
More Wilson, I have one quick question related to Julia's, and that is the about the parapet caps. How is the copper actually going to be attached to the masonry parapet?
We would just be screwing it from the top.
Okay, so it would be attached into the masonry. It would be
Yes.
fastened in some way, or would it be line fastened and folded and soldered, or?
Yes. So, I mean, it would be fastened into the masonry, and then it would be crimped on the backside. It would be crimped to our wall flashing that's that's coming up that parapet wall as well.
Right. And on the front side, it would come down about 3 inches and kick out like a drip edge.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and but would your fasteners be?
They would be hidden.
Okay, in other words, they would be installed, and then there would be the next piece would be folded in and soldered, or folded
Yes,
in
sir.
and crimped. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I appreciate the information.
Any other board comments at this time? I mean, excuse me, board questions. All right, Kim, do we have any public comment?
Good question. Doesn't look like it, no.
All right, if you'll do the city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff feel that this is an appropriate replacement for a minimally visible roof. So the staff recommendation is final approval for hand crimp standing seam roof without a ridge cap.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Otis, did you want to respond to anything in the staff comments?
No, thank you. I'm good.
All right. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote this time.
I think staff is correct. I would just hope that there would be some sort of detail provided for how, the attachment and the drip edge and everything work at the parapets.
No more here. I am in agreement with staff that this is, I think this is the only replacement for this roof. I mean, I hate to see it. There are 2 or 3 copper roofs between this house and Adger's Wharf. I think 89 and 91 probably, I think, have copper roofs, and I'm sure they were standing seam roofs or something else in the past. And I mean, turn roofs, standing seam turn roofs or something else. The rest of the roofs down to edgers are either turn coated, that have been coated or slate or tile. And I just want to express that it's a shame that, particularly in a place like Rainbow Row, that there seems to be no alternative to this. But certainly, this roof is minimally visible. It's in terrible shape, and a copper roof is a very good alternative to what's there now. I hate to see the loss of the more appropriately historic materials. I also I think the details on the parapet cap are important and how that's done. So I would just urge that details for that be looked at and approved.
This is Bill. I agree with my fellow board members' comments and staff's comment and recommendation. You can tell it's an interesting roof line. There are a lot of dynamics to it. So I understand really the only appropriate replacement material being copper. I did also want to just say one more thing, just to point this out. It's by fact that this is a minimally visible roof. And I want to make sure that that's a point defined as far as this board goes, because I know there have been past representations of tile and concrete tile roofs that the board has not allowed to be replaced with copper. But in deference, those roofs were very character defining features of those particular buildings. So I wanted to make sure that that was clearly understood, that the reason that I would support this recommendation is because it is minimally visible, almost to the point of not even seen.
Good point.
Bill, I agree with your point completely. Also, of course, we don't know what the earlier roof was, and this roof is certainly not it's probably also, I'll glance through the report. I think it's probably also hazmat. It's probably got asbestos in it. And so I think replacing this roof is certainly the appropriate thing to do. But I agree with you that it needs to be minimally visible, and that there's no other really appropriate. This is the most appropriate substitute, I think.
Well, I can make a motion for final approval for hand crimped standing seam roof without ridge cap, and board comment to provide a construction detail for the parapet cap attachment and flashing.
The parapet cap and what was that last part?
Parapet cap attachment and flashing.
Attachment and flashing, okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval for the hand crimped standing seam roof without ridge cap, and a board comment to provide construction detail for the parapet cap attachment and flashing. Do I have a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
Put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Otis.
All right. Thank you, guys and gals.
Bring Glenn back in.
I got him.
Welcome back, Glenn. All right, agenda item number 5 is 31 East Battery. Kim, if you'll please provide an introduction.
Thank you. 31 East Battery is requesting conceptual approval for renovation and addition. The building's at category 3 in the Charleston neighborhood, was built in 1837 and in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial, shows its location on the west side, obviously, of East Battery, just south of Water Street, right there on the corner. And here's some existing site photos. It's the front of the building. You can see Water Street there on the right. the piazza side at the south and the north side. And here's the west. This is looking south on East Battery and looking north. And this is looking west on Water Street. Let me promote the applicant panelist before we go any further. Okay. 1888 and 1944 Sanborn maps. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. Mr. Fava, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, board. My name is Eddie Fava with E. Fava Architects, and we are representing the new owner of 31 East Battery, John Stryker. Mr. Stryker purchased the property probably maybe almost a year ago, maybe a little less, but looking to do a wholesale renovation. Most recently, it's been the home of the Gear family with a bed and breakfast upstairs. It's suffered a little bit from, well, more than a little bit recently, but from deferred maintenance. But we've been asked to renovate it as a home for Mr. Stryker. So, Kim, I'll go to the next page if you don't mind. The plat of the property shows it's right on the corner of Water Street and East Battery. Kind of an odd shaped lot at that corner. Where obviously the main house is towards the front and East Battery with a garden that surrounds it presently. Next page, please. And photos, I think for anybody who has maybe had the time to go by it, don't show the current condition is as poor as it is presently. So we've tried to elaborate on some of those, and we'll try to move quickly because I know there are lots of other people behind us here. But just by way of history, the house is known as the Henry Porter Williams house. Evidently, Mr. Porter was given the choice between this home and, per John Poston's book, his father's home, which was a Calhoun mansion on Meeting Street, and he chose this one. He remodeled the house in 1903, raising the structure 3 feet above grade, stuccoed portions of the exterior on wood, which are what are causing some of the problems presently. And during that particular renovation, parts of the rear piazza were further enclosed, kitchen dependencies were modified and connected to the house and the main house. So as you'll see, as we move through this, it's undergone significant modifications over the years, not only much prior to the Gear family, but during the ownership of the Gear family. One thing I'll point out as we start the far left photo, you'll notice the kind of truncated bay that pops out at the far left of the left photo at the rear of the property. Sanborn maps have shown that originally that was 3 stories, and that's part of our proposal that gets restored back. Next page, please. So Sanborn maps, again, 1888, you can see that on the corner there where it is located. This was prior to the bay on the front piazza, but it was a 3-story piazza, a 3-story kind of addition element off of the rear, and then a 3-story kitchen house, which actually fronted right onto Water Street. In 1902, very similar. And shortly after that, when Mr. Porter, I guess, had inherited it or taken it on, is when the 3rd-story bay was added. The kitchen building was modified. There was a larger dependency structure in the far bottom corner of the 1944 historic map, Sanborn map. And that was pretty much the state of it up until the 1950s. Next page, please. And this was very interesting, and thanks to Charleston Museum, HABS, and Historic Charleston Foundation, Preservation Society, all of where we were able to find information. But again, in looking at it clockwise from top left, you can see it was originally all wood-sided, the structure, and the second level piazza was completely enclosed. You can see the top right photo. Again, wood siding with what was piazza screen and what was an entry at that point below the piazza. These are kind of artist renderings far left, still illustrated as wood siding. Next photo over. Similarly, where you can see the entry was literally at grade at some point prior to it being modified to its current condition. And excuse me, a little bit difficult to tell, but this is the last photo showing again, perhaps which demonstrates the raise in profile, which may not be as evident in some of the earlier photos. It looks like it's taller than its adjacent neighbor in these photos. So a list of the changes, again, with the house being elevated, the screen wall and entrance was removed, the portico was created, bays had been enclosed, kitchen house has been removed and added back on, parapet and balusters removed, third floor bay at the rear was demolished. Part of that enclosure was demolished. And as you'll see as we proceed, the rear portion, which is where the bulk of our work would be proposed, has undergone the most changes over the years, kind of in the Charleston tradition of when a little more space was needed, something just kind of was tacked onto the back of it. Next page, please. So again, some overall photos of the property. And again, it suffers, there's some significant settling going on with it, in addition to rising damp. And just as you'll see in the next couple of photos, the top parapet of the central bay that you can see is separating from the cap has literally happened since we were hired, 6 or 8 months ago. So whatever's going on is happening quickly, and probably more so now that it's not occupied. Next page. This is the area where the bulk of our work would happen, to the rear, which would not be visible from the public right away, with the exception of the extension of the third floor bay and the restoration of that back to what was there as demonstrated by the Sanborn maps. We had gone to zoning in September, and prior to that, speaking to neighbors and foundation and Preservation Society, had no objections from anybody with the request. It was a slight increase in lot coverage, but was able to kind of clean this area up. Top left, you'll see what looks like a portion of a chimney with the open piazza, when in fact it's painted white metal ductwork. A portion of a chimney stack is forward of that, but what you're seeing there is ductwork, just a hodgepodge of elements that had been added post 1950. Next page, please. Again, just to try to demonstrate, because it's very difficult to see, as you can tell from drawings, it looks pristine. Even the Google Earth photos look great, but looking at the damage that has happened to the structure, it's not insignificant, and it's deteriorating rather quickly. So looking forward to moving ahead with the project, but not the least of which may entail, as we rework the front of the building or repair it, when stucco on that element gets removed, if in fact it is deteriorated wood siding, Mr. Stryker has been willing to go back with wood siding per the original house, rather than put the stucco back on the structure. Next page, please. Similarly, I won't go through all of these in detail. Like I said, I know we're limited on time, but calling out all of the areas where there had been prior enclosures where we have damage. Again, these are currently 1/1 windows, which have a little bit of age to them, but the original ones were 6/6. So we're happy to go back with those as well. They have storm windows, which are ill attached. The stucco and the recess on the windows is evident of the fact that it is stucco over another substrate, such as the wood, is what we believe is behind it. Next page, please. To the rear, more of the same. All of this, again, just to demonstrate, which you can delve into, but the fact that much of what you're looking at is not original, and it has been kind of piecemeal added on an as-needed basis over the last 50 years. The proposal for the bay at the top right is the profile of where that would be returned. Next page, please.
Eddie, you've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, I'll keep rolling through the photos, then I'll let the board look at that independently. Next page, please. Wanted to demonstrate in the area, there are an awful lot of instances rooftop terraces and things of that nature. There is a proposal for such for this building. It wouldn't be visible from the public right of way, short of the access that we are proposing to it. Next page, please. And Madam Chairman, I might ask you if it's permissible to have another minute or two as we proceed. Like I said, it's not insignificant structure. There just seemed like a lot of background information we had to do to it, but we'll move as quickly as possible. Again, rooftop elements, not uncommon in Charleston. Some obviously done well and better than others. And you can pick the ones at your own leisure that you think fit that bill. But just to say that oftentimes they're not even things that you're aware of. In this instance, this one would be minimally visible, but we think would be attractive and provide access for Mr. Stryker, who needs assistance with the elevator and such to get up there. Next page, please. The type of monitor that we are suggesting that would abut the elevator tower on the Water Street elevation would sit right above this grand stair, which is currently kind of failing and sagging, but it would allow his access to the roof with the elevator immediately behind it. Next page, please. Again, more evidence of these type of elements and rooftop access in the immediate vicinity. Next page. This relates mostly to the proposal to have a one-car garage carriage house to the rear of the property in the orientation similar to what it had been in the prior Sanborn maps, but much smaller in footprint. And again, as approved by zoning previously without objection. Next page. So again, I'll move quickly, but existing plan above, proposed plan below, showing the location of the proposed carriage house, rather than putting something back on Water Street, although it had been that way historically very early on. It was much better received with neighbors and everyone else to default to something that was off the street and allow for the open space. Next page. Proposed plan, which really tries to restore some of the house to a grandeur that it warrants and clean up so many of the kind of haphazard additions and chopped up elements to the rear. Next page. Second level provides for guest rooms for his children and families. Next page. Third level is Mr. Stryker and his wife's residence or area, I guess I shall say. Again, with the restoration of that third level bay that happened on second and third floor, excuse me. Next page. And this is the roof terrace we were proposing and the monitor element that would be above the current staircase, trying to provide, at least for Mr. Stryker, the elevator at a bare minimum, but with it being there solo, we felt like it looked rather odd and out of place, and that the monitor would be a nice element, not only for the building itself, being something that barely qualifies as a category 3 and is in such sad shape that it would be a handsome feature. Next page. Existing elevation above, proposed below with the extension of the third level bay, the carriage house far to the rear on in the middle of the bottom drawing. The monitor above the main entry at the third level would again about maybe 20 or 30 feet back from the facade. I'll look at the dimensions, but you can see that in plan. Next page, please. Side elevation, restoring all of the siding, restoring all of the stucco work, proposing scoring of that element, operable windows, shutters. Again, the carriage house to the right at the bottom behind a new garden gate. Next page, please. Rear section, again, with minimal visibility to anything on Water Street, but the area where we'd be cleaning up those series of additions and the extension of the third level bay, restoring that. Next page. Garden elevation, again, minimal visibility. The restoration of the bay hides that from anything from any of the other elevations. Carriage house, bottom left of the bottom drawing. Next page. Carriage house top left as it faces East Battery. Again, it's set back quite a distance, but something that we think would be handsome and appropriate and complements the structure in a similar footprint to what was there, but much less floor area. Next page. And then that is, I think, where we'll end it with our kind of perspective of the final and proposed view, and then how it references to what is there presently with the photos adjacent. I will mention lastly that I can't thank enough Preservation Society and Historic Charleston. They've met with us twice, talked to us on the phone several times about this. The neighbors as well, Shay and John Kuhn, that are at a house to the right there in the bottom photograph at 2 Water Street. Jenny Bush just down the street behind the Kuhns, and then Mr. and Ms. Mansheim, which are directly behind our property, that just underwent a significant renovation and raising their home at 1 Water Street. But again, have enjoyed meeting all of them and very appreciative of their support of this project.
Thank you, Eddie. Do my fellow
Thank
board
you.
members have any questions for the applicant?
Fillmore.
Go ahead,
Fillmore.
Fillmore.
Go ahead, Julia. I'll follow you.
Eddie, did you say that you considered the option of moving away from stucco on frame and replacing that with wood, which presumably it originally was, or did I miss something?
No, you're exactly right, Julia. We, to be honest, felt like we may be going too far to say that at this point, although it's evidence that obviously it was wood originally, and the stucco is in significantly horrible shape, that it's going to have to come off. So per the submission, we would go back with stucco as it is, unless again there's a board request to do otherwise, but felt like it warranted mentioning at this level, because as the work begins, if something else is behind it, again, Mr. Stryker was amenable to going back with the wood if we had to get an amended approval or something, if we found that behind it and wanted to go that route. But presently, submission would be for going back as the stucco, but just kind of leaving that door open depending upon what we find behind it.
Okay, and last little question. I'm sure you've looked at it, but is there any other place that the elevator could be accommodated that wouldn't be right on the edge, the north edge?
No, ma'am. And Kim, if I could possibly go back to the plan, and sorry, I know that's back several sheets. Correct. And then, and maybe first floor, if you don't mind. Yeah, great. And again, Julia, I guess as we all, I'd be disingenuous if I said it couldn't go somewhere else. But for organizational purposes and where the stair was and how things came up, short of kind of defaulting back to some of the choppiness of what the other plans, the prior plans did, there wasn't a logical place to do that. It was something, believe me, we were very thoughtful and deliberate about, because realizing that may be a question or concern, but just felt like, again, particularly with this structure, it's not highly rated and it's in very poor condition. Tried to consider the fact that if something like that had been there with the monitor or that little grouping on that element to begin with, would it be something that was offensive or out of the ordinary to someone, and we just didn't think so. So left it in that location so that it could all be grouped into one element above the staircase rather than a couple different things up there.
Thank you.
Fillmore Wilson, Eddie, Julie just about asked all of my
Sorry.
questions. That's all right. That's great. My question was about the elevator, but I was going to ask, it does not go to grade, does it? That I can tell in the drawing?
No, sir. No,
from
sir.
the interior to the first floor level.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So, because that was my first question. If it doesn't go to grade and there's a reason for keeping it there, is there a possibility of looking at its location? And my other one, I missed. Do you know when the house was stuccoed?
I think 1903. We've had kind of different things, but it looks like Mr. Williams, when he got it, at least from the information we could find, that's when it was done. And it was done in odd areas, from where it was on the front and side piazza, but then the side piazza had been enclosed. it's not on the Water Street elevation, which is kind of odd. So it was kind of piecemeal, but from everything we could tell, it was 1903. And if I may circle back one quick moment to the monitor element in reference to locations again, and I may have iterated that already, but in speaking with those like the Coons that are directly across the street, we literally went up to their third level, looked across just to make sure that everybody didn't have any concerns or issue with it. And if I hadn't mentioned that before, I apologize, but they were okay with it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's at that point, it's possible that's stucco on black lath or even maybe wood lath, but probably black lath. And
yes, sir.
Yeah, and I don't sympathize with your job of having to address that. I went by and looked at it very carefully. It's from street
Yes,
level this morning, and the stucco is really in terrible condition. And so I commend you for suggesting that it all come off, and something, even if it goes back with an appropriate system and or perhaps even original wood siding, but I'm not sure how that would play out.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And absolutely willing. And I appreciate the willingness of the owner to do just that. So he said, please, to make sure that it's very clear to the board that, yes, sir, we tackle it methodically, going in like this with the intention of returning it to how it is. But if it were problematic, return to you all for approval to go back to the wood siding if necessary.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other board comments at this time? All right, Kim, do we have any public comment?
We do. We have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We really appreciate the applicant reaching out to us on this request, and we are encouraged by the intent to undertake a comprehensive and much needed rehabilitation of this building. There are many highly positive aspects to this proposal, but all proposed additions should be carefully studied to respect the historic form and character of the house. Given the documentation provided, we can support the reintroduction of the third floor bay at the rear of the piazza, which also helps to clean up the present configuration of the back of the property. In this direction, we do, however, feel the proposed rear addition adds a significant amount of mass to the footprint shown on the Sanborn maps. So we encourage restudy of this area to allow clearer transition between the main house and the additions. Specifically, we feel the corner of the bay should be able to fully return rather than being enveloped as part of the new addition. Lastly, we cannot support the rooftop monitor as proposed, which will be highly visible from High Battery and Water Street. And every effort should be made to conceal rooftop structures in general by positioning them toward the rear or interior of the roof, with both the height and the footprint minimized to the greatest extent. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Catherine. Kim, do we have any other public comment?
Yes, we also have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for conceptual approval for renovation and addition at 31 Battery, and we thank the applicant for reaching out to us. We are pleased to see that this building is going to be rehabilitated, and we commend the applicant for taking on this significant project. We are in support of this application with the exception of the extension of the stair to provide roof access. This structure should be set back from the edge of the building to reduce visibility. We have no objection to the installation of a shorter skylight structure in this location, similar to some of the examples shared in the application, but the proposed additional height for a stair will unnecessarily call attention to the rooftop access. We recommend approval of this project with a deferral on the placement of the rooftop stair access. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Kim, is that it?
That's it.
All right. Give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
We just have a handful. This building has survived many campaigns and modifications over its 185-year lifespan, including the elevation. From the south side, the rear additions appear disorganized, especially post-1950s, and the applicant has done thorough due diligence in exploring the history. The massing modifications are appropriate and improve some of the poor additions at the rear. Had they not existed at all, we'd suggest some changes to the footprint, but that's not possible. And the design improves the building in its current state. The proposed modification to the 3-story portion of west of the bay is one of these areas where ideally it would be further recessed, but it's minimally visible behind the extending bay. The extension of the bay to the 3rd floor solidifies the rear piazza and organizes the addition, and the staff feel that it's appropriate. The monitor is the element that's the most important. While it's minimally visible, it sits on top of the parapet wall. Ideally, this wall would be as far from view as possible. The applicant should explore different locations. Oftentimes, these quirky elements are what makes our city so unique, and so staff feel that this is appropriate. It does not detract from the historic character of this Category 3 building if it is not directly on top of the cornice or parapet. We would like to see steel windows and a lighter touch than these precedent photos depict. This proposal is well put together for conceptual level review, and we feel that this can be further reviewed at the staff level, provided the applicant's given clear directives from the board. So the staff's recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff.
Thank you, Kim. Eddie, did you want to respond or clarify anything raised in the public comment or city staff comments and recommendations?
Yes, ma'am. Just briefly, if I could, to the plan quickly, and I'll make it brief. And mainly, thank you, Kim, with respect to Preservation Society's comment and understood, but certainly did make the effort to expose the bay. As you can see, the return of that happens on both sides in a symmetrical fashion. Stands proud, and it is in an area that's not visible. Not that we feel it would be unattractive, but feel like that's been dealt with. Happy to do anything we can to restudy that monitor, and just feel like we're a little stuck with that location for where things land, and would be happy to minimize it and follow board's direction accordingly.
Thank you. All right, we will move into board discussion and a vote at this time.
Real quick, this is Bill. Just Kim, could you go to the 3rd floor plan or roof plan? That maybe the next sheet. There you go. There you go. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to look at that for a second. Go ahead, Fillmore. I'm sorry I cut you off.
I have a question for Eddie. Is there access to the roof, Eddie?
Presently?
Presently.
No, sir.
There is no access up onto the roof presently, unless I mean obviously from the exterior, but I mean from the interior.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Not that I'm aware of. If so, we hadn't been able to find it. So we're sorry, but no, sir.
Okay. No, I was curious. Thank you. I go ahead and start. I'm a staff. I think everything is an improvement in this building. Certainly is in dire need of attention. And as I said before, I applaud the applicant and Mr. Favor for undertaking this project, particularly considering the fact that there's 120 years of potential damage behind that stucco on the frame, which is really a problematic situation. My only concern is the monitor, and I think there is an opportunity to get it off of the edge of the building a little bit, I would hope. I understand why it's where it is, and appreciate why it's where it is. But from the current drawings, it was difficult for me to determine the visibility. I think it is visible from High Battery, and maybe, I mean, you'd have to get a little bit back on Water Street, but I'm pretty sure it's probably visible from Water Street as well. That's why my question about access, because if there's access, a little mock-up would be easy to do, but if there's no access, it becomes very, very problematic to do that. And so my only caveat is that I would, everything else I think is great. I would like to see a little more study of the location of that monitor and see if it can't be made less visible. We have fairly consistently in a very sensitive location like this rejected highly visible roof structures, and I'm a little reluctant to deviate from that.
I can chime in now, and I agree with most of what's been said. I am not having any issue with the footprint of the addition at the west behind the bay. And I do completely believe that it's not even going to be visible from the public right of way. I like that idea of potentially returning to wood siding instead of stucco on frame, which just always makes me nervous. So I'm hopeful that that's how it will pan out, but I know Eddie will study that as they proceed. And on that third floor plan, I don't know, Bill, did you have any thought about maybe some crazy elevator configuration where the last rise kind of steps in toward the fireplace and pulls it away from the edge of the building? I mean, I know you'd have to have like two separate shafts and somehow jump from one to the other at that last level, but maybe that's an option. And I think, Eddie, I think you mentioned that the owner has some mobility issues, and I noticed you do have a lift at the back. Is that, we're factoring that in, right?
Yes, ma'am. And again, I think I'd be doing him a disservice that I didn't mention, but I don't know how much weight it'll carry. But he said, yeah, avid sailor, loves his view. I know he gets it from the windows, and it's a good problem to have. But his heart was set on hopefully being able to get something up to the roof, or allow him to get up there. As at least the roof terrace element would be non-visible. The access would be something we could work on.
Seems like if you could pull that last rise, just have a separate little shaft for the last rise to the roof, pull it toward the fireplace, then I think your whole monitor could probably be less visible.
Right.
Hope so.
Yeah, this is Bill. I would say I'm in agreement with my fellow board members' comments and with staff's comments. Really, the only thing that's given me just a little bit of concern is the presence of the sort of rooftop structure on the parapet, as Kim mentioned in her notes. I appreciate. I just realized what was discussed about the owner's mobility issues, and that's I guess counter to what my initial thought was. Well, perhaps location of a stair somewhere in board, and separate. I do appreciate the efficiency of what you're trying to achieve here. It does make logically, it makes perfect sense. But I do have some reservations about the visibility of it. So I would say I'm generally in agreement with staff's comments and recommendation for that reason.
All right, well, I guess I'll just make a motion. Glenn, I'm sorry, Glenn, did you want to add anything?
Glenn, you're on mute.
So no, not really. I think the points that have been made, I don't have anything else to add. I agree. I understand the efficiency of the elevator shaft that's proposed, but I also fully agree with, if there were a way to pull it inboard a little bit, it would be very helpful. But I will echo that I think this is an admirable undertaking, and it almost blows my mind as to what is under that stucco. So best of luck.
All right, so I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments and a board comment encouraging a return to wood siding if that is determined to be appropriate, and final review by staff.
We have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments and a board comment encouraging a return to wood siding, if appropriate, with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
Second, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn. Put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you. Y'all have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Agenda item number 6 is 91 Spring Street. Kim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. 91 Spring Street is requesting final approval for new construction of a 2-story duplex at the rear. The building at front is a Category 3 in the Canterbury Elliottboro neighborhood, which was constructed in 1885 in the Old City District. The previous motion from September 9th of this year was for conceptual approval of both, with final review by staff of Building 1 and board comment to refine proportions and details on Building 2 with staff comments 1 and 5. Which number 1 was a complement, and number 5 is to coordinate the design of the east and west facing elements for a more cohesive design, low slope roof, siding, fenestration, volumetric proportions, width, etc. So just to give you some context, here's an aerial properties on the south side of Spring Street near Ash and Rose. Here's the existing site. And just kind of looking down the property in the driveway. This is looking west on Spring Street and looking east. Here's some Sanborn maps from 1888 and 1944. And some historic images. And with that said, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi, everybody. This is Eddie Bello with Bello Garris Architects. And as Kim said, I was here before the board back in September to present 2 buildings behind 93 and 91 Spring, and in addition to 93. And we're back with the building behind 93. It's technically on 91 Spring's address, but it's really relates to all 3, I mean, all of it. So Kim, could you go to the next one? So again, here's the view from the street. Next slide. I'll skip through this. I think everyone's aware of the historic building. The 91 is a little bit older, good bit older than 93. Next slide. Okay, so on the left is the existing site plan and the right is proposed. And again, building 1, which is upper left there, has already been conceptually approved, and we're working through the detailing now behind 91 Spring. To the right is 93 Spring, and building 2 is what we're reviewing today. So it's tucked as far back as we can get it on the site. And the majority of the massing aligns or is at least in line with 93. Next slide. The floor plan hasn't changed that much from what you saw last time, mostly just the fenestration pattern and how the steps worked. Next slide. Roof plan, next slide. Okay, so what we've done is we have changed really the roof pitch. We went from a gable to a hip. We've changed the fenestration patterns. And just to back up a little, actually, Kim, could you go to the next slide where we can see before and after? Yeah, so the drawings on the top are what we had last time, and again, what we're proposing now. And I think the board last time was okay generally, but we got that it needed refinement and some study, and I think that was right on. We struggled with this design, and frankly, we just need to go back to restudying it. So we simplified it. This is one of the first things I drew. I don't know why we didn't just show up with this before, but we had a hipped roof now. We cleaned up the windows, much simpler. We've always wanted that bay element to be a little more transparent and lighter. So it still has a lot of glass, but the windows relate better to the rest of the windows in the building, and they're a little more elegant in proportions. Next slide. These views aren't really visible from the street. Next slide. Again, what was before and what's proposed now on the bottom. Next slide. This is just showing the relationship of the building that you have previously approved, building 1, and then our building that you're looking at now on the right, number 2. Next slide. Trying to go through, so we have a lot of drawings. Again, this was before and what we're proposing now on the bottom. The building's actually gotten smaller. Next slide. Okay, so really I want you to look at the bottom drawing. That is a site section looking at 93 Spring to the right there, and then the addition that you approved last time. And we're relating to that addition. It's a little less traditional. We don't have the sort of break in the hip roof like we do with the addition, but we're using similar window proportions, similar trim detailing. Just wanted those two buildings to kind of talk to each other a little bit more. The eaves line up. Again, just on the site, we thought they worked a lot better this way. Next slide. Again, before and what's proposed now. And just keep in mind, again, that there's a break just to get this to fit on the sheet, but the building, the proposed building is actually pushed back a good bit further than what this represents here. Next slide. Just a section. Next slide. Stairs. Next slide. Next slide. I don't know why we turned all this in. Okay, so again, you saw this at the beginning. You will see this, but it's back there a good bit, but we want you to see it. Next slide. Just another view. Next slide. So one thing we did do, we changed the stairs. It's a little hard to see, but they actually both now face sort of the courtyard and the other building that we're proposing behind these houses so that they sort of talk to each other. Next slide. And very simple. We've used that same sort of detail. It's a low slope roof on the sort of bay element with a gutter that goes around and then ties into 2 downspouts, similar to what we're doing for the addition. We've refined the awning a little bit. We've always wanted that to be very, very simple and not look like a porch. We don't want it to compete with the more traditionally designed building on the other side, but we do need a cover and we want to mark the entry. So that's what's happening there. Next slide. I think it's the last one. You can kind of see how these two relate. Next slide. Simple materials that you guys usually see. And this is the last slide. So, that's it for my presentation.
Thanks, Eddie. Are there any board questions at this time?
Just a curiosity question. Can you go back? I think it's like 2 slides back, Kim. One more. Yeah, right there. Eddie, this is, I know, is kind of out of public right away. That little rear stair back there.
Yeah.
What is that construction?
It's wood. So you're not seeing, there's columns missing.
Okay.
On the other, yeah, it's not floating. I noticed that too. I don't know why they didn't show up in this rendering, but no, there are wood posts.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
I was just curious. I thought you'd come up with some amazing engineering marvel. I wanted to find out about it.
No, we originally had a steel stair, this very sculptural steel stair, and we cut that out because it wasn't going to be seen, and we thought we'd spend money elsewhere. But yeah, it will have normal columns. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, Kim, do you have any public comment?
No, we don't have any public comment.
All right, you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you. The applicant has followed the directives from the previous board meeting, and the proposal is refined, consistent, and relates well to the historic building at the front of the property. So we're in support of the application and we recommend final approval.
Eddie, do you have any Response?
No, I will take that recommendation. That's great. Again, I think the board comments before were right on. We just took them to heart and made the building better.
All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead. I'll just say that I think staff's comments right on. I think, Eddie, you have addressed in a very nice way my concerns from previously. So thank you. And I agree with staff's comments and recommendation.
Second that.
Glenn Gardner, I echo that as well. I think what needed to be done was looked at and successfully taken care of.
I'll second that too.
Well, I guess I'll make a motion then, since everybody's seconding. Can we say I'll make a motion for final approval?
We
Second.
have, oh, Julia beat everyone to it. We have a motion on the floor for final approval. We have a second by Julia. I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay, in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay, in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Eddie.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good rest of the meeting.
Thanks.
Agenda item number 7, 68 Cannon Street. Kim, introduction, please.
Thank you. "68 Cannon Street is requesting conceptual approval for modifications to a historic shed, including a 2-story brick addition. The building is a category 4 at the front of the property in the Cannon-Borough, Elliottboro neighborhood, and was built in 1872 in the old and historic district. In the old city district. Just for some context, here it is on the north side of Cannon Street between Rutledge and whatever street that is over there, Cumming Street, sorry. Here's some existing site photos. The main house in the middle here. And looking at the visible side of the driveway. And here's the east side. This is looking west on Cannon Street and looking east. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Andrew Gould. You have the floor when you're ready.
Thank you. So in brief here, there's a historic shed at the back of this property, which we're going to do some work on, and we want to build a 2-story structure adjoining it, which will basically look like a carriage house behind the front building, though it will be physically connected to the shed in the back. So first, to orient you to the context, if you want to just go through these slides a little, Kim, looking up the driveway. So this is the driveway entrance that goes back to the backyard where the project will be. I want to point out that the owner here, George Seago, who's been renovating and working on all of these buildings on this site for many years, he's very fond of brick, and I designed all these brick walls for him, which he's built over the years. And he wants to actually build a building out of brick using this same type of brick and this same type of traditional detailing. So if you go on, yeah, they're looking up the driveway. You can see that brown wooden shed at the back, and go on further as we walk back there. Yeah, going back into the back of the property there. This is the building lot, basically where that golf cart is parked is the building site for the new brick structure. You can see there's several new structures under construction. That white building and the 2 purple structures there are wrapping up construction right now, and they're substantially taller than what we're proposing to build. Go on and turning around and looking back south towards Cannon Street, and going on. So the shed here is quite an interesting structure for its history. It was built as the construction shed for the DaCosta Construction Company around the turn of the century. And I don't know if you're all familiar, but Benjamin DaCosta founded the construction company in 1899, and it was a very prominent Black-owned business, one of the very few Black-owned construction companies in the South, continued to be in operation through the 60s when his grandson, Herbert DaCosta, became a notable Charleston architect. And the family continued to own this shed until just last year, when they sold the 91 Spring property that Eddie Bello presented in the previous application. This shed was attached to that property, and the property line is being adjusted so that it's now being attached to 68 Cannon. Going on to the next slide. So now we're coming around, looking from the Spring Street side. We're now standing up on the porch of 91 Spring. Again, the project we just looked at with the last application, looking down at that shed and beyond it at 68 Cannon, going on. So you can see a few more views of the shed. Yeah, there it is at the back of 91 Spring. And go on. So there it is there. Very simple structure. We don't intend to change its exterior appearance very much. Go on. Yep, and going on. Yeah, the one side of it's just got metal siding on it, and going on. This is the inside. It looks much the same as it has for over 100 years. Simple balloon framed structure. The main problem with it is it has no real foundation. It's just sitting on railroad ties, sitting on the earth. Go on to the next slide. Yeah, and it's got a little staircase up to the sort of loft level. Go on, and that second floor is only about 5.5 feet tall, so hardly really counts as a second floor. And go on. Now, looking at the Sanborn maps here, the shed appears basically in its current form on all of these maps back to 1902. The 1888 map shows a longer, skinnier shed, which I think is not this shed, because the family says it was built by the DaCosta Construction Company, which was founded in 1899. So I'm guessing it was built, at that time, right before the 1902 map, and has been pretty much unchanged since. Interestingly, looking at the 1944 and beyond maps, you can see that there were buildings at the back of 68 Cannon in roughly the same position as where we want to build our new building. Go on. So here we have the site plan. This is showing the property line adjusted, which is in the works right now, so that the shed becomes adjoined to the back of 68 Cannon. And you can see the proposed site plan where we've got our 2-story brick building attached with a little hyphen to the shed. And I should say the function of this, programmatically, I'll explain what the function of all this is. George wants to keep the shed partially as a construction shed because he uses it as a construction shed currently. And in order to increase his storage area, he wants to put a basement under it, whilst also giving it a proper concrete foundation, which will help preserve it. And then the new structure is proposed to be just a big dining room downstairs, because George runs this whole multi-building compound as a bed and breakfast, and he wants to have a dining room where he can serve breakfast and where groups of people renting these vacation rentals can rent out the dining room for catered meals, that sort of thing. And so the part of the shed will turn into like a little catering kitchen and a bathroom that will serve that dining room. If you go on to the next views. So the view looking from the street, you can kind of see there's a dashed in outline of the new brick building behind the front building, but it's not at all visible in this view. It's completely behind the front building. And go on to the next one. And here's a section through the site. And you can see our little 2-story brick building in the back there. The second floor of that building would be office space, which George will use as his property management office for running everything there. And it's got an external metal staircase to get up there. Go on to the next one. Here's the first floor plan. And again, the first floor is just one big open room in that brick structure. And we're proposing very little changes to the shed itself. The Spring Street side, which is really the front of it, will be completely unchanged. And go on to the next one. And the second floor, here you can see the office space upstairs. Next one. Roof plan, next one.
Mr. Gould, you've got about 2 minutes left.
All right, well, I can run through these quick. This is just existing and proposed of the shed. Go on to the next one. Again, from the Spring Street side, go on to the next one. Here's the detailed elevations of the shed, of the new structure. It's we're proposing to build it out of solid masonry in a reinforced brick system. So it's basically interior and exterior brick shells infilled with a low density concrete that would have some insulation value, reinforced with carbon fiber rebar to avoid any risk of rusting and damaging the brick. So it's really going to be, you know, have the thickness and the feel of a 19th century solid brick sort of building. And the big arched doors there will be steel and glass doors. So this will be a really, really elegant, top quality building. It'll look like a really fine sort of renovation of a carriage house kind of structure. Go on to the next one. Here you can see a detailed elevation of all of this elegant brickwork. And the next one. This is a building section where you can see the reinforced brick walls there and the beamed ceilings on the inside and the hipped roof with a gentle bell curve. And go on to the next one. And section through the shed showing the proposed new foundation with basement. And the last drawing on that page is a section through that discrete little hyphen, which is extremely simple. And the next one. Just window detail. And I think then the last one here is the steel stair details, if you can go on to that. Yeah, there we are. So it's kind of a, structurally, it's kind of a modern steel stair, but the balusters and posts will have cast iron elements, which we've actually used all over the property. The fencing we've put at the front and the staircases we've put on those buildings all use these same steel details with cast iron balusters and posts. And go on to the last images here, which is the renderings. So this is the existing view, and go on to the next one, and you can see the proposed view. That's the extent of the visibility of this building from the street. You have to stand at a very tight angle, and you can just get a glimpse of it up the driveway. And if you go on to the last one, there's just a more detailed view of that. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
Did you happen to do a rendering from the east, like down the neighbor's driveway?
I don't have a rendering from the neighbor's driveway. It will be visible sort of similarly at a raking angle from the neighbor's driveway. You can see that on the site plan.
All right, and again, these are the dwellings on the site are all short-term rentals, right?
One of the five dwellings in 68 Cannon is George Sego's own personal residence. The other four are short-term rentals, and all of the dwellings on his neighboring lot on 70 and 72 Cannon are short-term rentals.
Okay. Just and zoning reviewed this, I assume, and TRC, if they reviewed it before, they're okay with this.
Well, it's not required to go to TRC because we're not adding 2,000 square feet of commercial space and we're not adding any residences. Zoning, yeah, Lee has reviewed it. He said it's all zoning compliant because it's all commercial construction and this is commercial zoning. So there's no setbacks, there's no coverage limits, sort of anything goes with commercial construction.
I'm curious because I've had issues in our own projects about trying to create common amenities for short-term rentals, and that seemed to be frowned upon. But
you're correct. It's prohibited under the commercial short-term rental ordinance, but it's not prohibited under the bed and breakfast ordinance, which is what he has this licensed under.
Thank you. And then let me just ask a couple more, sorry. Would you or did you consider kind of enclosing that stair rather than just having it a single run exterior?
Well, we considered a lot of different ways of doing the stair. This seemed to be the one that was least impactful to open space and parking. It's behind an existing wall that's already there. He's already got this screen wall that has air conditioning units and trash cans behind it. And there's actually very tall bamboo planted in front of that screen wall. So the reality is that stair will be hardly visible.
Any other board questions at this time?
But yeah, this is Bill. I'm sorry. I thought Julia might still be going there. What is the total rise on that stair, by the way, since we were just looking at it?
It's 12 feet exactly.
12 feet exactly. Okay, got it. Got it right there past the landing. Regarding the construction of the new foundation / basement system under the shed, how are you going to lift the shed? Did you describe? If you described it, I missed it. How are you going to?
Well, our engineer Russell Rosen has looked at that, and he recommends that basically 2 by 12s be bolted along the side of the building just above the foundation level to catch all of the studs, and then the whole thing just be lifted up on jacks, detaching the building from the railroad ties that it's currently sitting on, and then just setting it right back down.
Okay.
It's a very lightweight structure.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Any other board questions? All right, Kim, do we have any public comment?
We do. We have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you, Kim. This is Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would first like to echo the comments of the applicant and really underscoring the lesser known significance of this building and its association with the H.A. DaCosta Company, the shed building in particular. And while the Preservation Society finds this to be an attractive design, we are having a bit of a difficult time reconciling the relationship between a rather high style dependency and a vernacular utilitarian building. Since the two structures are connected, we would encourage continued study of the compatibility of the new construction with the historic building in terms of its design, materials, and details, as well as studying reduction of the height of the chimneys, which appear overly prominent. Thank you.
That's all we have.
All right, thank you, Kim. If you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
The project consists of minimal alterations to the important and historic building and a handsome brick building that's appropriate in height, scale, and mass. The proposal is thoughtfully designed and has enough information for final approval pending an on-site brick mock-up. So we're recommending final approval with that brick mock-up.
Mr. Gould, did you want to clarify anything or respond to public comment or the city staff comments and recommendations?
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, although we're technically presenting this as an addition to the shed, sort of from a design standpoint, that's not really the idea or the genesis of this project. The motivating factor here is that Mr. Seego wants to build this brick amenity building as an amenity for his accommodations operation there, and he wants a beautiful, elegant structure, you know, that will complement the high style of the antebellum front house, which of course it reads as a dependency to the front house. So in trying to figure out what to do with this shed, you know, the shed is a bit of a liability in terms of, you know, nobody really wants it. The developer who bought 91 Spring Street did not want it. We've spoken for years, you know, over the years with the city staff as to what we could do with that shed, you know, and they've said they'd rather we not demolish it, but that, you know, they acknowledge that, you know, sheds have to be adaptively reused, and, you know, had suggested that we could probably turn it into a house. We could probably put a proper second story on it. You know, so, you know, ultimately we thought, well, George Seego actually needs a construction shed, and he's been renting that construction shed for many years from the former owner. Why don't we just move a property line and give it to him? He can keep using it as a construction shed, you know, and in addition to that, it can serve as some kitchen and storage space for this amenity building he wants to build. So, you know, I think given all of that, it should be understandable that we're not trying to defer to the shed or, you know, expand the shed. We're trying to make the shed functionally serve the, you know, the higher end uses of 68 Cannon Street, because the shed is, of course, a servile building. You know, it was only ever meant to serve, you know, other buildings, you know, rather than have an architectural character of its own. So I think this is kind of the best of both worlds. We're keeping it a shed, we're keeping it looking exactly the same, but we're providing it a new use that actually gives it a, you know, an economically viable purpose in this day and age. In terms of the chimney height, they look kind of high in a drawing, but because they're real wood burning fireplaces, chimneys do have to cap out higher than the ridge line of the roof. That's a code requirement, and it's typical on old buildings that have real fireplaces. So I think, you know, I think in reality, looking up at it from the ground, it's going to look the way it's supposed to look.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
This is Bill, I'll go ahead. I agree with staff's comments and recommendation. I believe it's a handsome building, well detailed. I'm appreciative of the shed staying, and I believe the applicant just made a really good point, a continuation of use for a building that was intended to service another property or home. So I'm in agreement with staff's comments and recommendation.
Glenn, I kind of keep going back to the questions about the stair. I'm a little troubled by that single run of stairwell that just feels a bit odd. I think it would be better served to have a landing and to do something different. And I don't know about the height of the chimneys. I definitely think they appear a bit high, but perhaps we could go back to that elevation maybe.
I guess I could have Glenn, to your point there, I could have specifically asked the applicant, or maybe we can, what is the top of the chimney, less than Bishop's cap, but the top of the chimney, how high above the ridge line is that?
Let's think about
about 18 inches.
Yeah, actually code-wise, he's very close on that. It really depends on when the actual flue exits. So
I mean, I think proportionately the two-story building with the 5 windows over the 3 arches all feels very in tune. The chimneys feel as if they get a bit overwhelming. I mean, they're almost sort of a bit Virginia-esque in their prominence. And I think that should at least have another look. But I think the stair troubles me a little bit because it's tacked on to this otherwise artfully done building, which admittedly is much higher style than ever would have been built in this part of town. But I know we've struggled a little on other projects lately where style has been elevated beyond what that part of town was known for. And I guess my only other comment is that, to be perfectly frank with you, there have been a lot of things on that front house that I don't think were approved. And I'm hoping that, if this application is moving forward, if those things haven't been dealt with, I think they probably should be.
All right, I'll chime in and just say that, I agree it's a handsome building. And I will be very honest and say that I'm fully aware of that TRC loophole, whereby if you add on to something, you can sort of get around review. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that. And that stair will be really visible, I think, down the driveway from the east. So I would encourage some restudy of that, see if there's a different way to accommodate it. It does feel foreign and additive rather than intentional and integrated.
Sorry, go ahead, Fillmore.
Fillmore Wilson here. First of all, I agree with Mr. Gould that this is really not an addition to that shed. It is an independent 2-story building. I think it's a very attractive building. Like a couple of my fellow board members, I think the stair is a bit awkward, but I think the building is a very attractive building. I think its height scale and mass are appropriate for the location. I particularly appreciate the high quality of the intended construction. But that said, I'm inclined to agree with Preservation Society. I think this building is high style for the area. And even though the front house is a very handsome house, I think this building in its design, even though I will emphasize again, I think it's very handsome, and its design does not relate to that building or really the neighborhood. I made a trip by there today, particularly to get a feel for the streetscape there. And this building, I think, is quite high style for the neighborhood. And the material palette really does not fit with the other structures adjacent to it or on the property. And so that for me is the biggest problem.
Fillmore, if the palette were the same, but just the details were simplified, would that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a very attractive building. I think it's appropriately sized. I think it's that almost everything about it, maybe except the stair, is very attractive. I think it's high style for this location. And for me, the material palette doesn't fit. I'm not sure that it couldn't, that the material palette couldn't be adjusted. And I don't mean completely changed, but adjusted. And to make it fit better in its location. And certainly the height, scale, and mass of this building, I think, is fine. I really, in the general appearance of the building, as an individual structure, I can find it almost nothing that I don't appreciate. But it reads to me very high style for this location. So I think a more modest pedestrian building would fit better here.
Lindsay, do you have any thoughts?
I do think it's a really nice building. I think my biggest worry now is what Fillmore raised, that we just recently had issues with the building over on the east side. And I don't think this is quite to the level of what we originally viewed on that. It was a residential structure. And I think they came back one or two more times. And the comment was to, probably more eloquently said than this, but to make it a little less high style. And on that one, I don't think that we gave it a conceptual approval. This one, I agree with my fellow board members. I'm comfortable with the height, scale, and mass, but I think maybe there's some detailing that could be revised to address Fillmore's concern and bring it more in style with the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think I go back to a very similar comment to the project or the other application that, you know, we've all kind of alluded to or referenced, that, you know, very, very careful here not to discourage quality building materials, because that, you know, that is something that I am, you know, absolutely appreciative of in Mr. Gould's application. And I also have to keep in mind, I mean, this is a residential neighborhood. I mean, I understand the current zoning, but, you know, all of these houses and buildings were relatively humble. Nice, but relatively humble. And so I don't want to recommend watering this building down, but I do think that there could be some gentle simplification to allow it to fit better into the neighborhood. And I am troubled by the tacked on stair, you know, from day one of construction. It's one thing if that happens over time as something evolves, but knowing that the plan of the building doesn't allow to have a stair on the interior just means that the form is in front of the function. And so I think there just needs to be a gentle look at a few of these items.
I think a gentle simplification accurately states what, I agree with that comment, Glenn.
This is Bill again. I hear what you guys are saying. It's a really handsome building, and it's very hard for me to, considering, you know, the quality of what we're seeing here, you know, to say it's almost too good. I guess the thing I wanted to sort of make sure, because the level of detailing here, but even potentially simplifying it, that it should be, again, differentiated from true historic material. I mean, that's one of our charges here, to make sure that, and I don't know, I guess I was even looking at it as a play of saying, well, it is obviously different than anything around it. But it's sort of accomplished in a different way than making it a modern building or something like that. But I guess what's weighing on me now is, per the discussion that the board members have had, is that it's obviously different to the trained eye, knowing historically, you know, and historically about the neighborhood and context of the neighborhood, it's obviously high style and, you know, conjectural to that point. I don't know if it meets that requirement though of differentiate. That's where I'm torn right now. It's obviously different, but is it different in more of a modern or striking context to historic materials, or is it just different because it's high style in historic context, but it's you'd have to be a scholar to get the difference. So I don't know. I'm a little bit torn in that. I like the fact that it's, in my mind, that it's different. I think it should be different. But maybe it went different the wrong way, I guess is what you guys are saying. So I'm trying to weigh that out. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Does it seem like collectively the direction is maybe a deferral with comments to, what you say, Glenn, gently simplify?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know,
architectural direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, Julia. I mean, I'm just, you know, as I keep looking at this elevation, you know, to the comments about, you know, maybe a little grand, maybe a little stylistically heavy for the neighborhood. But I mean, you know, I'm holding my fingers up, and if I actually cover up the chimneys and cover up the stairwell that's tacked on, it actually then appears to be a much more straightforward, humble building, even though the detailing of the building itself is the same. So, you know, I would challenge the applicant to consider their program. I mean, you know, maybe 2 large chimneys on this otherwise small building makes it a little heavy. I think there are some things that he could work through. I mean, he definitely has the eye and the talent to make that happen, I think. And maybe there are a few brick details that get just not eliminated, but toned down in that respect. I mean, I think this building, the detail of it, would arguably carry it to be the most highly detailed masonry building on this entire street that crosses the peninsula. Am I wrong about that? I mean, I think this has more detail than the white stucco building across the street.
Andrew, did you want to respond to something? I'll allow it.
I'm saying the obvious comparison here is the Cannon Street Fire Station. The Cannon Street Fire Station looks very much like this building and has even fancier brickwork.
Yeah, Glenn, you actually, when you said that, you're holding your fingers up and taking away the chimneys or the stair, and it just had an interesting effect of simplifying the building, and it looks really nice. I'm not saying you completely remove the chimneys, but it had the desired effect when I removed those elements.
Yeah, totally agree.
Go ahead.
I would say it made it feel much more toned down, if you will.
And I do want to emphasize gentle simplification, because this is it's a really nice building.
I 100% agree with that statement. So it sounds to me, just to keep us moving forward, like scale and the mass is generally full to the board. And we're more looking at sort of material detailing and finesse to perhaps tone the style of the building down. a little bit. Is that a fair? I'm not trying to. Fillmore, did I miss any of what you said?
Oh, I think that's right on, Glenn, and I would reiterate what you said earlier in that, you know, I really appreciate the intended quality of construction in this building, and I would certainly not want to see that go away. I think what it needs is pretty much what you said. It needs a gentle reduction in style and detailing to make it a little more, to use a word that I would use, just a little more pedestrian. And it is, to Mr. Gould's comment, I appreciate the architecture very much of the firehouse, and I appreciate the architecture of this building. I think it's a lovely building. This building is not a firehouse. It is an ancillary subordinate structure to an attractive wood frame main house, and so I agree with Glenn's approach. Really, I know it's not very a very exact definition, but that sort of general reduction in detailing and high style, I think is quite appropriate.
Yeah,
So-
I'll ask you guys a quick question. I'm sorry, Glenn, I cut you off.
No, you do that.
I just wanted to ask you guys a quick question regarding the stair. Are you suggesting a switchback type arrangement? Is that what we're getting at in your deliberations?
I think so. I mean, I wish the stair were internal. I mean, that's how it really should
Okay.
be, but
just to be clear, you know, I think a lot was stated about the singular long run of stair, but never really, well, I would rather maybe see it go in this direction, but I think the insinuation would be a switchback, right? Is that fair?
So might I propose a draft motion for a deferral for finesse of detailing of the structure, for a slight reduction in high style, and reconsideration of the two chimneys and the straight run stair, both to be restudied, but with board appreciation for the high quality of materials in the design. That might be weird, but I'm just acknowledging the appreciation for this not being proposed to be plastic.
Okay. Let's see if I can accurately. So deferral for finesse of detailing of the structure, or slightly reduce the style, the high style of the building. Reconsider the two chimneys and the straight run stair, and a general note that there is appreciation amongst the board for the high quality of the materials and design.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Fillmore, I'll second.
I'll put it to a vote. Bill,
Yeah, in favor. So yeah, in favor.
Julia,
Yay, in favor.
Glenn,
Yay, in favor.
Fillmore,
Yay, in favor.
and the chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gould.
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item number 8 has been withdrawn by the applicant. Agenda item number 9 is 207 Calhoun Street, and Fillmore is recusing himself. Remove him from the meeting. All right, Kim, if you will give us an introduction, please.
I will. 207 Calhoun Street is requesting preliminary approval for egress stair with extension to the 4th floor. The building's category 2 in the Charleston Village, was built in 1813 in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial just for some context. It's on the corner of Calhoun at Pitt Street. Here's the building. On the east side, and the west side. And this is looking east on Calhoun, the building on the right, and looking west. And that said, previous motion was from August 26th of this year. The motion was final approval for all of the repairs, but deferral for new construction of egress stair and board comment to eliminate all handrails and remove anything that is expressly not required for code. Right. And with that said, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Good evening. My name is Brittany Cohen, and I'm here with Abby Gentry tonight. Jeremy Tate could not be with us for this meeting today, but thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this project to you. As stated, the focus of our presentation will be on the emergency egress stairway that extends from the 1st to the 4th floor. Our previous application for all other proposed improvements and exterior restoration efforts received final approval. You'll also notice today that we are requesting the addition of salvage shutters at the north elevation and 3rd floor west elevation. Next slide, please. The goal of this project is to first and foremost maintain historic character and structural integrity of the building as a whole, and to secondly, improve the building's life safety and usability for the College of Charleston. Working with the College of Charleston and the authority having jurisdiction, Mark Lanning, Office of State Engineer, it was determined that the lack of a second exit from the habitable 4th floor is a life safety concern that needed to be addressed. Here you will see 2 letters of support from the OSE and the College of Charleston's Fire and EMS. They both state the need for a second egress to improve life safety of this building. During our research and our discussion with the OSE, we explored the idea of possible interior code compliant solutions which would address this issue. Code compliant interior modification options, such as including an interior stair or mezzanine reconfiguration at the 4th floor, became detrimental to the project and would remove more historic fabric of the building than what would be ethically or feasibly appropriate. The building as it exists today has maintained a high level of historic integrity on the interior of the building. Through our studies, we determined that an exterior stair was the most appropriate option to satisfy the requirement for a second exit. We understand the sensitive nature of adding an exterior stair to a historic building, and we believe that the following proposed design provides the most respectful solution to maintain the building's current use. Next slide, please. Just a brief extension of history on the building. 207 was constructed in 1817 as a residential structure. In the 1970s, the house was restored, and at that time, the rear outbuilding was demolished and replaced with a 2-story CMU office building. The top photo on this page shows the restoration that was completed in the 1970s. We believe it was at this time that the wraparound piazza was removed to accommodate the stair that exists today. Next slide, please. And here's just the site and building plan. The proposed stair is located at the hyphen between the main 1817s building and the 1970s CMU building at the south. Next slide. And here we just have some additional exterior context. The images on the left are the existing building, also showing the current shoring on the piazza. And then on the right, we have our restoration renders and then the exterior stair addition. The first view is from Calhoun Street, where the added stair is not visible. The second image is going to be from the corner of Calhoun and Pitt Street, where you can begin to see the 4th floor stair railing above the piazza roof. Next slide. And then here from Pitt Street, you can see that the stairs start to become visible. You'll see further along in the presentation that compared to our previous submission, the stair from the 3rd to 4th floor now allows for less obstruction of the height and roof line, keeping the building's overall massing line the same. Next slide, please. Here's our existing west elevation, where you can see the existing stair that extends above the 2nd floor piazza roof. Next. The demolition of that stair. Next. Our previous proposed west elevation. Next. And here's our current proposed west elevation of the stair. The configuration of the stair from the 1st to 3rd floor has stayed consistent with our previous application. Our focus has been to improve the impact of the stair at the 3rd to 4th floor run while taking past board comments into consideration. Here you can see how we modified the configuration of the 4th floor access by shifting the landing as close to the dormer as possible and aligning the stair to the roof. Next slide, please. Here's the existing north and south elevation. At the south elevation, you can see the current stair stopping at the 3rd floor, and you can also see the extent of the missing piazza. Next slide. And here's the demolition of the south elevation. Our proposed 4th floor stair access would require us to remove an existing 1970s window at the dormer and replace it with a door that leads to the new stair. In this demolition process, we would be sure to only remove minimal historic framing at the roof and dormer wall where necessary, and maintain that material so that it could be utilized in the future if the occupancy was to change. It is important to note that at the dormer, we would only be removing one historic rafter and would be cutting back a small section of historic board sheathing, both of which we would suggest be preserved. The goal of these changes are to be reversible. Next slide, please. And here's our previous proposed south elevation. And next. And our current proposed north and south elevation. At the north elevation, you can see the reintroduction of these shutters. And at the south elevation, you can see that the stair has been shifted further east to allow us to add back a portion of the piazza roof, which is highlighted in red here. And next. And here's our existing east elevation. Next. The demolition of the east elevation. Next. Our previous proposed east elevation. And next. And our current proposed east elevation. And next. Since the first to 2nd floor run has not changed, we're going to start looking at the 3rd floor, showing the existing stair location. Next. And here's the demolition of that stair. Next. Our previous proposed plan. Next. And now our current proposed 3rd floor access. As described previously in the elevation, here you can see in plan where we propose to add back a section of the 2nd floor piazza roof. The stair footprint at this point is tucked behind the corner of the south building. Next, please. Here's the existing 4th floor plan. Next. And the demolition of the 4th floor plan, showing the extent of the dormer material that will be removed. Next. Our previous proposed. Next. And our current proposed 4th floor plan. Next. Then we can just go through these. These are just the roof plans. Next. Next. And next. Our current proposed roof plan. And next. And this is our previous proposed stair detail plan, where you can see that previously the stair footprint followed the same route all the way up to the 4th floor. Next. And now our current proposed stair plan. The stair starts at the 1st floor piazza and wraps up and over the new ADA bathroom. From the 2nd floor piazza, the stair keeps the same footprint. As the stair goes up to the 3rd and 4th floor, It is recessed as far east as possible, tucking the stair back against the hyphen building. To minimize the visual impact of the stair and restore the historic character of the building, we are proposing to reestablish the wraparound piazza to the greatest extent possible. You can see this at the second floor. The new piazza decking will match the existing, and at the third floor, the piazza roof will extend to the edge of the new stair. Next.
Ms. Cohen, you've got about a minute left.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Here you can see our previous proposed stair sections. Next. And now our current proposed stair sections. Again, you can see the change in the stair run from the third to fourth floor. It's important to also note that although the stair will be touching the historic structure, the stair will be self-supporting and not rely on the existing building for structural support. Next slide. And here is a 3D color rendering of the restored building with the stair addition. In conclusion, it's our belief that this is the most feasible and minimally visible solution to a life safety issue that maintains as much historic fabric as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Do any board members have questions for the applicant?
I missed it. Was there a detailed section of that through that new dormer door and the top of that stair run? I saw the building section, but I didn't see a detailed section of that.
No, I don't believe we have we've got a building section, but no detail section yet.
Okay. So you are going to be, and I guess as maybe before as well, actually going to be over the envelope of the historic building itself, not just the piazza, but you're going to be over the envelope of the historic building. How are you going to accomplish that sort of cut in, if you will? I'm just trying to understand what that's going to be doing.
Could we go up, I think one more slide? Yeah, and maybe zoom in a little bit on the right-hand, section there.
Yeah.
So that'll, that landing is basically going to become like a mini roof, and we don't have that detailed out yet, but we will definitely provide further detail on how we're going to integrate that and close off that envelope.
Yeah, and I would just then make a note to staff. That's really important because there is historic material that's obviously going to be removed and would have to be worked around. So that's a really important detailing there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other board questions at this time? All right. Do we have any public comment?
We have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this request. This is an early and significant Category 2 building, and we are encouraged by the proposed preservation work going on throughout the building. We are also appreciative of the efforts to lower the proposed exterior egress stairs since the previous review. However, given that the introduction of an exterior stair that extends to the fourth floor would be highly visible and impactful to the existing historic fabric, and in particular the south-facing dormer, we remain opposed to this alteration. We ask that alternative configurations be explored to ensure any exterior stair remains concealed beneath the piazza roof. And the Preservation Society is sympathetic to the programmatic needs of the college, and we remain optimistic that a compromise can be reached that will facilitate the objectives of the project as well as sensitive preservation of this significant historic building. Thank you.
And we also have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for preliminary approval for an egress stair at 207 Calhoun Street. And we thank the applicant for their time with us at the site to review the proposal. We believe that the applicant has come up with a good solution to address the concerns expressed at the last meeting. We recommend approval. Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right. If you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Well, thank you. The applicant has followed board directive and has removed some of the visibility from the egress stair while extending a portion of the piazza roof, so we are in support. We recommend final approval.
Thank you, Kim. Ms. Cohen, did you want to respond to anything raised during public comment or in the city staff comments?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead. I'm inclined to support this staff's position and recommendation. Obviously, it's a dilemma for the use of the building, given the ownership and the requirements that they're having to deal with. I would like to make sure that whatever is really done, especially as it involves the main envelope of the building, is reversible to whatever extent. And I would amend staff's recommendation to include final details to staff, because again, I think that cut-in detail is very important to understand. And other than that, that's my position. Thanks.
It's Glenn. I'll just quickly concur with Bill with regard to that detail. I think that definitely should be reviewed by staff if we were to go that route. I just don't want to forget to say that if the discussion goes elsewhere.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. I hear what the Preservation Society is saying. But I appreciate the efforts that the applicant made to reduce the impact of that stair somewhat, and still think it's a net win for preservation, given all the repair and improvement work that they're doing as part of this. So yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I'll just make a motion for final approval with final details to staff and a board comment to include a detail at the access to that dormer.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval and final details to staff and a board comment to include a detail to that dormer. Do I have a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
Put it to a vote. Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Cohen.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10 has been withdrawn for staff review. We are on agenda item number 1123. Oh, excuse me. We need to bring Fillmore back in.
And kick me out.
You're recusing for 23, Ann? All right. Kick Julia out of the meeting, but not permanently. We have the solar policy.
Will do.
Gotcha.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
All right, Julia is gone. Okay, agenda item number 1123 Ann Street.
All right, we're good. 23 Ann Street's requesting conceptual approval for 4 murals on the west elevation of the building, which is a category 2 in the Mezig-Ragbro neighborhood, was constructed in or around 1840 and in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial. It's the train shed between Ann and John Street. And here are the sister sheds, and 23 Ann is this one here, which came before the board at the beginning of the year for restaurant upfit. And here's the rear of it. This is looking east on Ann Street and looking west on John, and looking east. Sanborn maps from 1902, 1951. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So we had taken over a failed restaurant that was along the promenade across the street from the Children's Museum. And we felt that one of the reasons why this restaurant failed was because the building was sort of inaccessible and didn't interact with the promenade because there was no penetrations on the side of the building, and the side of the building was just very boring, and I don't think most people would walk by it and didn't even know that there was a restaurant there. With the BAR's approval, we were in the process of putting in a series of 15-foot wide garage doors to open up the side of the building and open up the restaurant to the promenade. In addition, there's a very nice deck that's attached to the length of the building that's on the promenade that was enclosed by a railing that was a solid railing and didn't allow anybody to see into the restaurant, even if there had been penetrations. But now that the side of the building is open, we put in a new railing that we feel is appropriate to the rest of the project and further opens up the restaurant to the promenade. We have 4 large spaces in between our garage doors that we're installing that sort of cry out for some civic art. They're just big blank spaces, and there's really not much we can do on there other than just paint the color that you guys approve. We thought it would be much nicer for the promenade and for my restaurant to have some very nice artwork on there. And we submitted 4 proposals for your approval to see if you think it's okay. I spent a lot of time driving around Charleston looking at all the other public art that was around, and I felt that what I proposed was appropriate. I hope you feel the same way.
Kim, can we?
That's what was there.
Or can we see the murals?
Yep, that's all. Yep. So this is the new elevation. You can see on the top 2. Those are all the garage doors, and you can see where the blank spaces are. And those are the murals that I want to put in.
Mr. Sweeney, did you want to entertain board questions at this time? I just want to make sure if you had any more presentation that I was going to let you speak, but if not, I'll let the board ask questions.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's it.
Okay. All right. Do my fellow board members have any questions? All right, let's move on to public comment. Kim, do we have anyone speaking from the public? You're muted.
We don't have anyone speaking.
All right, if you will give city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Thank you, Lindsay. The concept of murals on the building is certainly appropriate. With this long expanse, the murals will not all be visible at the same time. These adaptive reuse train sheds are becoming the terminus of the low line, so it should be a lively area with engaged pedestrian traffic. However, these murals seem generic in nature and should be redesigned to incorporate some interesting, thoughtful, or uniquely artistic artwork. So staff's recommending denial for this particular design.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Sweeney, did you want to respond to any of the staff comments?
Sure. This is Mitch Banchek, actually. Dan Sweeney is my architect. And he was.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. We also feel that it it's going to be a lively area, and there's going to be a lot more pedestrian traffic there, and that, yes, the murals are appropriate for those walls, and we think that those murals are interesting, thoughtful, and uniquely artistic. And we think that they go nicely on the promenade, and we also were cognizant of the fact that there's a children's museum across the street. We made them colorful and, and I think aesthetically pleasing. I think that it bodes well for that specific location.
Thank you. I'll open it up now for board discussion and a vote.
I will, Glenn, I guess I will ask the question that I did not ask that I probably should have, but I had hoped we would kind of find out. Then hearing staff's comment, I kind of agree. My question, I'll ask the applicant to clarify. Is there any tie between your proposed mural design and the intended use of the building? As in, if that's a cup of coffee, is there a coffee shop? Is it a beachwear shop? I don't know. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's all right. We certainly have a coffee component to it, to our, to our establishment. So we will be serving coffee, and there's no beachwear being sold there. We like sort of the nod to Charleston and the Greetings from Charleston postcard mural, and the sharing is caring. We thought two reasons. One, we thought it would be nice for the kids. It's kind of a photo op. You can stand under the umbrella and take a picture. But I should also tell you that there's two operations going in here. One of them is called Share House. So I don't want to be misleading. Sharing is like, I guess, kind of like, part of the name, but that wasn't really the impetus for this picture. We actually saw this online and sort of and took it in a different direction. That's about the extent of it. In terms of the coffee, the other establishment is going to be called Bodega, and Bodega will be serving coffee during the day, but it's primarily a gourmet breakfast and lunch sandwich place that will be more of a Cuban style restaurant at night.
Kim, can you go back to the, the sharing is caring one is probably the one that I'm okay with. I agree with the comment that it's just, these are generic. The coffee one obviously screams New York to me. And I think these are great locations for murals, but it's the three to the right. They don't seem very Charleston, although I realize the one says Greetings from Charleston, the holy city, says Charleston, but just, I think we can be a little more creative here and more true to the city of Charleston. But I would be completely fine approving the sharing is caring one and having the other three come back to something that is a little more, tailored to this city, and not something that I feel like I would Google and would be on a t-shirt for coffee or for the beach. With the beach one, I don't think that we have those on any Charleston beach. But that I'd be interested to hear what my other board members think.
Lindsay, I pretty much fully agree with you. I think the sharing is caring one is unique, and I think it's friendly. I think the Miami lifeguard tower is sort of a Google image, and the postcard one's probably a little, I don't know. Well, the postcard and the coffee one, I think, are both just a little generic as well. But I guess looking at the building, I think the two vertical elements lend themselves well for this application. I guess I question whether it should be 4 murals. It's getting a little postcardy. That's sort of my take on it, as opposed to a unique mural. It's getting a little postcardy.
Fillmore here. I'm generally in agreement with staff on this. Sharing is caring one. I think if I knew a little more about the application, and I think it's the most interesting one, clearly. The other ones tend to appeal to me as billboards. And I think what needs to go here is artwork and billboards. And certainly I would like to see it a little more related to sort of Charleston's uniqueness, as opposed to just sort of a generic coastal concept like Myrtle Beach. So I'm in line with Steph. I actually think the sharing is caring one is the best one of the four. Glenn, I'm sort of interested in your take on whether there should actually be four here or not. I hadn't thought about that. It's an interesting concept, which it's clearly the two more vertical ones have well, that's wrong. They have great potential to be killers, and but the other two probably do too with the appropriate artwork. But certainly, I think that the two vertical ones have the most potential to really, to be killer standout murals.
Yeah,
I
think.
Sorry,
go ahead, Bill. No.
Oh, I was just going to throw in just a question for Kim. If there is obviously a connection to a commercial venture inside, is this attributed as signing from a zoning standpoint?
Yeah. You remember there were two murals, the same board meeting night, maybe even a year ago. One of them was for a coffee shop with wording. It was in Italian, but it still said coffee. There was a coffee cup and a woman drinking a cup of coffee. And you all requested that, the connection to the coffee be toned down. Because yes, it is considered signage for the business. And this is, obviously way too large.
That's what was getting me. And that image in particular is by declaring it a mural and declaring it public art, but having it indeed the subject matter be germane almost to an advertisement. I think that's kind of a similar concern to that other that you just referenced, Kim. And I think we're into a point now where we're getting into kind of a subjective conversation about, it's either there's two things that would either be striking to us about, well, three things maybe that would be striking to us as a board, I would believe, about this type of thing. And I might even suggest that maybe the powers that be at the city consider maybe a public art committee or something like this, because some of this times it's just a little dicey, but it could be the color that's striking and glaring. We may find that. We may find the subject matter to whatever degree appropriate or inappropriate, but again, purely subjective there. Or we may find the size of the and arrangement of the images as maybe being problematic or approvable, either one. So really, I would base my comments more on the potential free commercial advertising that's going on in the name of public art. That's a little bothersome to me. And that's the trouble with graphic art, very, very graphic art, like the postcard image or the Baywatch Tower or whatever we're going to call that other one kind of image. I'm dating myself there with that reference. I see civic art as something to be more like, I like the idea of the sharing is caring with the kids going and getting their pictures taken there. I love that idea, and I believe that would happen there. To me, that reads more as what I would conceive to be civic art. The others just give me more graphic connotation of some format of either commercial venture advertising or signage in some way. So that's really where I have issue with it in general. So I'd love to hear what you guys maybe think about that, or if I've given any food for thought there.
Bill, I think that's all, you know, valid commentary. I think the more I look at it, the more I get to the quantity of 4 unrelated murals. There have already been a lot of pretty big changes going on to this building. Maybe 4 murals is more, 4 individual separate murals, that may be too much here.
I agree with that, Glenn.
I mean, perhaps I might feel differently if there were a common theme leading from one to the next.
Glenn, Bill, I think your point is, Fillmore here, I think your point is very well taken. And Glenn, yours is as well. There is, I think, an opportunity on this space and in this location to do something that's very interesting and worthwhile from, Bill, from what you said, from a perspective of civic art and not just creating 4 billboards. And so, and maybe something with a common theme would be much more palatable than what's being presented. I'm not saying that, that's what has to happen, but I think that Glenn's right in the idea that's one way to make this much better.
So what if I toss this out as a suggestion? If I were to weave together all of our commentary, because I don't want to discourage this. I mean, I feel like this space needs to work. It needs to, come alive, hopefully. And so I would propose that we defer the vote on the 4 murals for a restudy of the quantity and the theme of the murals, and note that the board identified more positively with the northernmost sharing is caring mural in today's submittal.
I think that's fair, Glenn. And I just had one more thought while you were saying that. And I think this goes to more of the graphic murals, or potentially could be conceived as advertising murals, is that once they're there, it's not to say another commercial venture could come along and maybe want to paint, like a real literal, logo there saying, well, there was already something there. I think sharing is caring is much more of a civic message. And I think that's kind of the point you're making, Glenn. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So
I think it would be, I'm just going to say, I think it would be dangerous to say like, okay, hey, we approve 1, but not 3. I think we need to view this as one property with one eye.
Glenn, did you make a motion?
I don't think I called it a motion, but I'm fine with that being called a motion, but I have no idea how to repeat it if I needed to.
If it were a motion, it was a motion for a deferral with restudy of the quantity and theme of the murals, with a general of note that the board identified more positively with the sharing is caring mural.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
And
I'm making that a motion. Yes.
And I will second that when you're ready to call it, Lindsay. But you just read it, so I'll second it.
Thank you, Bill. I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Vancheck.
Thank you. Thank you for your time very much. And
I apologize for calling you Mr. Sweeney.
that's okay. I've been called worse. But thank you for your time, and I understand what I heard, and we'll come back to you with something that I hope that you'll like more. Appreciate it.
Julia is back. We are now down to the policy on solar collectors. Kim, I figure you can just present it, whatever you have. We'll do public comment, and then we can do a board discussion of it. You're on mute.
So this is what we have. Shall I read it, or would you all like to read it yourself?
Did everyone?
I've already read it.
I've read it.
Or where I went.
So did everyone have the opportunity to read it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess let's move on to public comment then. Probably most of the discussion will happen in board session, but any public comment, Kim? I think
We have April Wood here to speak.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the language of the proposed solar panel policy statement and has submitted suggested revisions. We are in support of the policy statement conceptually, but recommend that the final version is edited prior to adoption. Thank you.
Any other public comment, Kim?
That's all we have.
Okay, we'll move into board discussion, and I sort of dove into this. There's two things I want to immediately point out just for consideration by the board. The first are the two criteria. Making sure that we are covering everything we need and not leaving a hole. So for example, buildings rated category 1 and 2 on the architectural inventory in any of the districts that are above, those shall not be visible. What I don't want to do is miss a category 1 or 2 building that we otherwise have purview over and create some sort of hole. But I also don't want to expand our purview to something like the Upper Peninsula where we might not have jurisdiction. So just focusing on those first two criteria. And the other thing I want to point out is I think it's down in paragraph 5. The rule here, it may actually, and I had a discussion with April about this, that not penetrating, and it shall not be installed on historic turn metal or historic slate roofs. Most of the roofs downtown are of this type, so we may actually be prohibiting solar. And what is the point of the policy if we have created a rule that pretty much solar is prohibited? So with that, I'll let others comment.
All right. I mean, I think this is a really good start, and thank you, Kim, and Lindsay for getting it to this point. The one thing I noted that stood out to me was that item number 5, the guideline number 5. I mean, personally, I don't know, I guess I'm conditioned by having traveled a lot and noted how other countries are really confident about introducing these things, even in historic settings, because it's important for the whole planet. But maybe with number 5, maybe it could somehow be woven into the visibility factor, you know. But if we are going to have that requirement that it not penetrate historic roofing materials that are visible, or however that pans out, I think it'd be important to just like spell out for these applicants that those freaking S5 clips are not a solution to put panels on a metal roof. They just don't work on historic metal roofs, because we've had that same conversation with so many people, and it's really frustrating.
And On that note, I had number 5 marked as well. Turn metal roofs are particularly problematic, as are slate roofs. I still think that with careful planning, now, and this is a problem, you're not going to get it from from a solar company with guys out knocking on doors trying to sell solar panels, but there are ways to install these things on historic roofs sensitively. And if the design is done properly, and I don't think you're going to do it with sort of standard, industry available stuff, but I'm convinced that you can do it sensitively and properly, even though it might require a particular kind of penetration in historic material. So I'm a little reluctant, if we're going to, push green energy, I'm a little reluctant to completely outlaw solar panels on historic roofs. But at this point, I think the language that allows them has to be very carefully drawn. I certainly haven't given it enough consideration. I just know, thinking in my head, if I had a slate roof, I know how I would go about putting solar panels on it. But it's a little complicated, and it's not really, it's, ordinary person downtown isn't going to know how to do that. And it's not, I don't think it's prohibitively expensive to do it correctly either, but I think it's more expensive than just a guy knocking on your door selling you solar panels. So
That's really, really cool to hear, Fillmore. And maybe there can be a guideline in here that says these applications, if they involve a historic roof, they should come from a contractor with experience, who understands the materials and the sensitivities.
Yeah, I think we have to have custom details, specific to that application and that structure.
So Fillmore, I had made a note on my list over here for number 5 that I felt like number 5 is appropriate once you remove the period and say, unless specific details are approved. Because to me, that would allow someone to come to the board or to staff with a site-specific appropriate detail that may be perfectly approvable.
Yeah,
I think you're right, but I will say one thing to that, and I think Fillmore made a good point in what he said, because some of these may require penetration. So when it says should not, it doesn't say must not. So I mean, I think that leaves the door open for that. And I think 5 is really the sticking point of getting this right. But I did have one more real quick minor thing before I forget, because I've been known to do that. Can I move this on the screen? Are you zoomed in, Kim? Or I'm no. Can you move up to those?
Give you control.
Sorry. This one, right? Oh, you're good. Right there. You're good. Okay. Where it says, I'm on the category 3 and 4 comment, shall be allowed some visibility. That to me is a little, I would just maybe change that to be minimal. I'd rather be the arbiter of minimal visibility than some visibility. To me, that just seems a little too open.
But wouldn't we be the arbiter anyway when they come to apply?
We would, but I would would you rather be the arbiter of determining what's minimally visible than some?
Oh, I'm in a different camp. I like to see them. I like to see them.
I'm asking. No.
The minority.
No. I mean that it shall be allowed minimally visible from the public right of way is what it should say. Not just be allowed some visibility.
I think Julia's okay with more than minimum visibility is what she's saying.
More than minimum? Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But as long as we'll review them all anyway.
Okay.
Or you can say maybe allowed some visibility. How about that?
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe allowed some visibility.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's kind of a legal point. I guess Lindsay ought to ask you. Isn't one stronger than the other?
Yes, shall be means that we have to approve them. We have to approve a varying degree of visibility. But if we say may be allowed some visibility, it does give us some room to
Yes.
deny it for category 3 and 4.
And then that sets us up better to arbiter what is some visibility. So Julia had a good point. I think make it a may instead of a shall there.
I think our ordinance uses the word should. instead of
Should,
may.
okay.
Could. Because
Should,
should,
woulda, coulda.
I don't know.
Mhm.
May gives us
I
a
like
little
may.
more discretion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whatever legally is the most correct word use there, is the only thing I'd throw out. And then to me, the only other thing was, yeah, kind of us identifying what number 5 really is meant to say. Because Fillmore, what I took it to mean when you're talking about, I would have looked at, if somebody challenged me to put solars on a slate roof, I would propose, a slightly elevated, call it rack system or grid system where I might only need, 4 well contrived penetrations through a roof, and then everything slightly above the roof deck, that didn't touch the roof or something like that.
Can we go back down to 5?
Yeah. I think Glenn may have hit on the, so you might want to, review that. Glenn may have sort of hit on the perfect way to put that into very succinct language.
But wouldn't his solution, which I totally like, would we need to remove that first sentence and then say what Glenn suggested?
Unless you were to add the word generally after not. So installation should or should generally not penetrate historic roofing materials, solar collectors, blah, blah, blah. And then without specifically approved detail at the end. I mean, I think that would, to me, that leads to say that it is discouraged, but it's not a no unless you have an approved unique detail. I mean, I think somebody hopefully is going to come to us soon with a great detail of how to do this.
That's not going to be Joe's solar panel because we've seen too many of them.
And it's not going to be an S clip, but I mean, there are plenty of people out there who I am confident can figure out how to properly do it without ruining the roof.
Yes.
Right. I think, what's going on here is just a matter of semantics of how this is worded to get the intent of what we're trying to get at. And I believe I think April said they have some comments too. I think maybe, I don't want to kick the can, but I think we might need to defer this. I'd like to see their comments. And I'd like to see if we could get maybe staff, if you could talk with whoever it's appropriate to speak with to sort of, have the language kind of parsed to be more, in line with kind of what we discussed tonight and what our intentions might be.
One quick clarification. So HCF have been incorporated. April, I don't think you have seen this final version after I incorporated your comment. So I don't want to speak for you if you have some additional comments, April. But the good news is HCF's comments were taken into account in the redrafting. And I was coming at this from the perspective of the lawyer layman who someone comes to and wants to get around the policy and making sure it was clear. And I'm glad that everyone focused on 5, which was the big, I was expecting a deferral actually, so that we could get that one right.
That's cool. And I think it might really be worthwhile to add something in about who the applicant should be or what the angle should be. It should be specific to the historic fabric that we're having to deal with on this board, not just generic approaches.
I'll go ahead, Lindsay, kind of what you said. I'll make a motion for deferral, just pending further refinement of comments per discussions and ongoing conversation.
So we have a motion for deferral for refinement per the discussion here. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll do a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia.
Yay in favor.
The chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
We are at the end of the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?